Example 1e. Solve the quadratic equation, quantity 2x minus 3 squared equals 4. This example is similar to our previous examples. The thing that makes it different is that inside the square, the object inside the square is not a single variable, but instead it's a variable expression. But that's okay. We're still ready to apply the square root property because we have a variable quantity squared equals a positive number. Let's quickly review that square root property again. If quantity squared equals k, then the quantity equals square root of k, or the quantity equals negative square root of k. In this example, 2x minus 3 stands for our q, and 4 is our k. So that means to solve this equation, we simply take our quantity, our q, which is 2x minus 3, and we set it equal to both the positive and negative square root of 4. So we have 2x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 4. That's our first step. Now we proceed to solve this equation for x, and this is what makes this a little different than before. We need to go on and get x by itself. To do this, the first thing we need to do is move the 3, the negative 3, from the left side to the right side using reverse operations. This means I want to add 3 to both sides. Generally, we put the 3 in front of the plus or minus sign as we're doing this. So that means on the left, I'm left with 2x equals, and on the right, I have 3 plus or minus the square root of 4. Continuing to solve for x, we're going to divide both the left and the right side by 2. So that tells me that x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 4 over 2. Perfect. Now, this looks a little complicated here on the right side. So our job now is to simplify. Notice we can go farther. Square root of 4 can be simplified to the number 2. So we have on the top 3 plus or minus simply 2, because the square root of 4 is 2, over 2. At this point, I'm going to have to break up my equation into the two separate equations. That way I can go on and continue to simplify in an easier fashion. Let me do that right here. This here tells me that x is two different things. X is 3 plus 2 over 2, or x is simply 3 minus 2 over 2. And by separating it, I can simplify these down farther. X equals 3 plus 2 over 2 is simply 5 over 2, or 5 halves. X equals 3 minus 2 over 2 is simply 1 half. That means the two solutions that solve this quadratic equation here are 1 half and 5 halves. Let's box that answer, that solution set. You can check your answers. Let's finish with one more final example. Example 1f. Solve the quadratic equation 2 times the quantity t plus 5 squared plus 13 equals 113. Our first goal will be to get this equation in the form that we can apply the square root property. That is, some quantity squared equals a positive value k. We want to solve for this quantity squared on the left and move everything else to the right. So we begin by subtracting 13 from both sides of our equation. That's the first step. Doing so on the left, we get 2 times the quantity t plus 5 squared, and on the right, we get 100. This moves us one step closer to isolating t plus 5 squared. Continue on, divide both sides by the number in front of that quantity, 2. When we do that, that gives us on the left side t plus 5 quantity squared equals 100 divided by 2, which is 50. We're now perfectly set up to apply the square root property. We have a variable quantity squared equals a positive number. When that's the case, the object inside the square, in other words the quantity t plus 5, is set equal to both the positive and negative square root of the value or positive number on the right, in this case square root of 50. That is, t plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 50. We continue, solve for t. That means isolate t on the left, so we need to remove the 5 by using reverse operations. And as before, we put the 5, in this case negative 5, in front of the plus or minus. This gives us t equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 50. Our final step is to simplify. What can we do with the square root of 50? Let me see. Well, off to the side, what's the square root of 50? The square root of 50 is equal to the square root of 25 times 2, which is the same thing as 5 times 2 under a square root, which means we can pull out this factor of 5. So the square root of 50 is simply 5 times the square root of 2. Putting this back into our equations, we have t equals negative 5 plus or minus 5 times the square root of 2. Our solution set consists of the following two numbers: negative 5 plus 5 square root of 2, negative 5 minus 5 square root of 2. Two answers. Write it like this or with this notation. Both are correct. I will say one more thing. Notice we cannot combine the 5 and the negative 5 or the negative 5 and the negative 5. Why can't we put these two terms together? It's because they're not like terms. This has a square root too, this does not. So these two terms have to stay separate. That completes our examples on the square root property. In the next topic, we look at yet another method for solving quadratic equations.